Hey guys, welcome back to lesson 7. I actually just minimized my list over here, which you can do. Any window you don't really want to see, you can minimize in Eclipse. So we're going to start a new scanner, and what I'm going to do is, since this first line you need for every time you use a scanner, I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste it right down here, but it doesn't like our variable dog because we've already used it. So I'm going to use one of the most used ones, which is just KB Reader, which is like keyboard reader. So we just asked to enter a name. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do an int. So do system out print line. And then we're going to say, what should I multiply by 3? And then put the space, and I'm also going to take out that line. Usually when you print stuff and you want a response, it goes in the same line. And our first line gets the scanner, second line asks a question, the third line inputs the user's response. So if we're going to be getting an int, we'll call it like int I, we'll get boring with our name, equals whatever our scanner's name was, so it was KB Reader. And we're going to do next, but not just next. Look, it already is giving us a hint. We said that this is going to be an int, and so we're going to look for nextInt. Open close parentheses because that's where it's going to save in the program, is in those open quotes. So then, our last line, system.out.print, and we'll do a line, and we'll do 3 times I. So what it's going to do is it's going to multiply 3 to whatever we enter, as long as we enter an int. So let's go ahead and run this. Enter your name. Again, it only prints the first thing. It says, okay, so this is how it's going to work. If you ask multiple questions, it's going to print your answer and it's going to print the next line. So what should I multiply by 3? 7, which is 21. Hooray! If you don't want that line to print out every time, you can do a block around it. So you just have a block comment. You'll just have to remember to take that out. So now whenever we type something in, it's just going to ask what should you multiply by 3, and then it'll give you the answer. So now, what if you want the user to enter both? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste this down here. So this was input 1 number, this is input 2 numbers. So we still keep our KB Reader, but we're going to have to rename it again because we've already used it. So I'm just going to call it KB Reader 2, KB Reader 2. All right, and we'll change our question. So we'll say, instead of saying what should we multiply by 3, we'll say what numbers should we multiply together. Okay, so here's our first number. And here's our second number. We're just going to call this J. Now we're going to come down to this line and say 3 times J. And saying we have an error, there's no semicolon on this line. There we go. Much better. Now it's saying we're having an error here because we've already had 2 I's. So we'll call this one K, and we'll call this one K. All right, so what we're going to do is we run our scanner like we do our first line every time. We say what numbers should we multiply together. It will take the first number that we enter, then it'll take the second number that we enter, and then it'll multiply them together. So I'm going to put this chunk of text in another block comment so we only have to deal with this. Go ahead and click run. What number should we multiply together? Pick 4 and 8. There we go. So I press enter in between. If you run it and you do 4, 5, space 3, then enter, it recognizes the space as a divider too. So how this works is it's saying that the next int entered should be K. So we entered 5 as K. For j, it's saying that one entered after that integer is going to be j, which we entered 3. So then we come down here, we do 3 times 5, and we get 15. So I'm adding this to my notes because we can't import more than one thing per scanner as long as it's the same type. So in our project, we imported 2 ints, which we are able to do under the same scanner. If we imported an int and then a string, we would have to use 2 different scanners for that. So when you're trying to think of what you need to use if you're using an import, the string up until the space, so just one word at a time, is next. So like in our code on line 19, we said .next, and remember it actually just brought back our first name up until the space. So now if you do an int, use nextInt like we did here on line 26 to import numbers, and we also used it on lines 33 and 34. You can also obviously import a double, and it's called nextDouble. We also have nextLine, which if you look in here, so what line would do is it actually imports the full string, not just up until the space. So I'm going to comment out this last chunk of code here, and I'm going to revisit this code we wrote up top. So before, when we ran it and we typed in our name, sometimes you have to move your cursor, and it only prints back your name up until the space. So if you change this from next until next line, run it, it will type in everything up until you hit the enter button. There you go. You guys are ready to move on to the last video for lesson 7.